Well, all right, Mike, here we are, just weeks away from the trilogy, what some might call even the rubber match between Gennadiy Golovkin and Canelo Alvarez. 4 years has passed since Gennadiy and Canelo got in the ring the last time. What are some of the variables for you as you look ahead to this fight?
Well, one of the key variables, Chris, is the amount of inactivity which Gennadiy Golovkin will have to overcome. He's fought only once in the past 16 months, and against Ryota Murata in Japan, it wasn't the most impressive performance. Now, in turn, he was coming off the longest break in his professional career. So maybe we make allowances for what for me was a subpar performance. The jab that we've spoken about that was so effective in the first two fights, to me, appeared to have lost its zap. Now, if we make allowance for the amount of time he'd been out of the ring, but again, if you want to extend the time out of the ring, then in the last 3 years, and I know this includes the pandemic, but he's fought only twice. And in that same period, Canelo has been much busier and against, you have to say, a better level of opposition. So I think the variable is how much of the key variable is how much of Golovkin is left. If it's only the amount we saw against Ryota Murata, then I think that's not going to be enough. Now, I'm making allowances for him having been out of the ring for so long, and with the issues in the build-up and the conditions around all the COVID restrictions in Japan at the time. So here I'm trying to look for reasons rather than excuses as to why he should be breathing so heavily as early as the second round, why he should be troubled by body shots in the way that he was for so long. I take heart from the fact that he finished very clinically in the way that he might have done 5 or 6 years ago with a single right hand. And if you look at Murata, then there were times when he was grimacing in the rounds previous to the one where it all finished in the ninth. But I just think that there was too much evidence there for me in that fight that Gennadiy Golovkin at 40 isn't anything like the operator that he was 4 years ago and 5 years ago when he faced Canelo first and second time around.
Yeah, I agree with most of that. Before Canelo, Gennadiy was a take on all comers type of fighter. He would make financial allowances so that significant fights could happen. And even though he didn't get the Miguel Cottos and the Sergio Martinez's, and for a while, Canelo, he was willing to get in there with Daniel Jacobs, with David Lemieux, whoever he had to get in there with. He would find a way, Curtis Stevens on that list, he would find a way to get it done. Since the second Canelo fight, it's like he's been, I don't want to say cherry picking necessarily, but he's been taking as many non-threatening fights as he possibly could. I mean, Steve Rolls, he took as a shake off the rust fight, anticipating getting Canelo in the fall of 2018. When that didn't happen, he moved to Sergey Derevyanchenko, and then it's Kamil Szeremeta, and then it's Ryota Murata. Now, there were, reasons for these fights. Szeremeta was a mandatory title defense. You had Murata, who had a full version of a middleweight title. So now he is a unified champion going into this third fight with Canelo. But he didn't take on Jaime Munguia. He didn't take on Demetrius Andrade. He didn't take on the kind of fighters that he normally would have before his first two fights with Canelo. That makes me wonder, how much confidence does Golovkin and his team have that he can still win a big fight? The other part of it is, and I mentioned Derevyanchenko, in the aftermath of the Derevyanchenko fight, you had a lot of questions about the body stability of Golovkin. And you saw against Murata. Murata hit Golovkin a couple of times in the body and made Golovkin take some deep breaths, back up, regroup. And against Murata, he was able to do that because Murata is not a threatening puncher and not really an elite middleweight. I wonder, knowing Eddie Reynoso, knowing Canelo, who are going to have an excellent game plan when it comes to body attacks, just how much can he withstand if Canelo relentlessly goes to the body? I mean, Canelo is a cartoonishly good body puncher. Like, his speed, his power to the midsection, it's as good as anyone in boxing. He's going to be attacking that body of Golovkin. Can Golovkin at this stage of his career, at 40, having been through all he's been through, Can he hold up to that type of assault? That's, to me, is the biggest question for Triple G.
And so we come to questions around Canelo as well, Chris. If we're looking for hope, if we're looking for a reason to look forward to this fight in the way that we got so excited in anticipation of the first two, can we ask the question of a man who's been a professional now for 17 years, well over half of his life? There's a lot of hard rounds, a lot of hard fights. Another line from Manny Stewart at that clinic I spoke about some time ago was that you can often judge a fighter's age not in months and years, not by the calendar, but by the hard rounds, the number of hard rounds that they've had. And for all of his successes, there have been many, many hard rounds in those Canelo fights. There were hard rounds for him most recently against Dmitry Bivol. There was a time in the middle of the fight, a spell, quite a long spell in the middle of the fight, of relative inactivity where he seemed to take a holiday. Did he do that because he had to? Because he no longer has that relentless spirit, either in body or mind? Just something else that for me is not a throwaway line. He plays an awful lot of golf now. To get to the standard he plays golf, you have to play a lot. And I just wonder whether that at this stage of his life is a factor as well. And whether that takes away from the amount of concentration, the amount of devotion he has in the gym. I hang on to what Jerry Eisenberg, the writer from Near Your Patch, said about Ali and Frazier way back in the 70s, that when they fought, eventually it became a fight not for any title, but for the championship of each other. And I get that kind of feeling about these two, that once the bell rings, that they will bring the best out of each other. And I just hope that there is still, in both cases, a semblance of what we saw in 2017 and 2018. And then we can all walk away remembering a great trilogy rather than two of the three fights being memorable.
Yeah, when I look back at the Bivol fight, it's not an excuse because, you should be prepared and Bivol was great, but I don't think Canelo took it as seriously as he should have. I think maybe Canelo looked at Bivol and saw the way he struggled against Craig Richards, saw that he couldn't knock out a Lenin Castillo, watched the tape of him in his more recent fights and say, you know what, this guy's not going to be a major threat. Then you get in the ring with him and Bivol has the performance of his life. Fights like the guy we saw coming up when he was fighting on HBO and he was knocking out Sullivan Barrera and some of these fringe guys at 175. I think for this fight, to your point, he's as motivated as he's ever going to get. Like, this is the fight where he quiets all the critics, answers all the questions, and finally gets that definitive win. That's his mindset anyway, I think, coming into this fight, to win this fight and to win it definitively so people know who the better of the two boxers is.
So finally, one extra factor, Chris, that I think might play a part, and it's the unknown that we won't know until maybe some rounds into the fight, and that's weight on both sides. Canelo coming down from light heavyweight. I know he's done that before, but he's got to do it again at the age of 32. Will he be affected by the weight drain? And on the other side, Gennadiy Golovkin fighting at this level at super middleweight. Will he have the necessary frame, the necessary bulk to adapt to the heavier poundage? Just another imponderable that we can throw in the hope that what we see is something very special.
Yeah, with Canelo, I mean, he dropped down from 175 after beating Sergey Kovalev, proceeded to win, four straight fights, become the undisputed champion at 168. I think he knows he's comfortable at that weight class. Golovkin is a bit of, that's a little bit more mystery, I think, to it. I mean, going up from 160 to 168, Golovkin, he's been basically 160 pounder since the amateur days, which is almost unheard of in boxing. Never moved a pound, really, except for a couple of catchweight fights later in his career. So I think he could stand to probably benefit from those 8 extra pounds, but it certainly is going to make for an interesting fight that I think both of us agree. Let's just get a clear winner in this one.